Hello and welcome back to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast, your go-to destination for all things culture in the manufacturing world. I'm your host, Jim Mayer, and I'm thrilled to bring you another episode filled with inspiration, innovation, and intriguing insights. But before we jump into today's show, let me remind you to visit our website at manufacturingculturepodcast.com. There you'll find episodes, merch, and resources that you won't find anywhere else. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram to stay updated with all of our latest happenings. And speaking of happenings, our show is brought to you by industry leader Spironi, a name synonymous with excellence and innovation in tool management. Now, on to the main event of our podcast. We're about to introduce a true game changer in the realm of leadership and cultural transformation, Adrian Koehler. As a founder and senior partner at Take New Ground, Adrian is not just a coach, he's a revolutionary figure reshaping the landscape of executive coaching. He empowers leaders and entrepreneurs to achieve groundbreaking results and find fulfillment in their professional journey. Adrian's expertise isn't just theoretical, it's steeped in a diverse and rich background, ranging from philanthropy, easy for me to say, and ministry to activism and medicine. He's comfortable navigating complex and challenging environments, bringing his unique perspective to each situation. His dedication to enhancing human performance has taken him around the globe, impacting lives in times of crisis and transformation. With a client list that includes the U.S. Navy SEALs, Nike, Virgin Hyperloop One, and the Oprah Winfrey Network, Adrian's impact is both broad and deep. Before his move to Los Angeles, Adrian was making a profound difference as a pediatric intensive care specialist and as a pastor and community organizer. His educational journey with a master's degree in theology and a Bachelor of Science in nursing underlines his commitment to service and leadership. So let's get ready to dive deep into the world of leadership, culture, and transformation with Adrian Koehler. Welcome to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. Adrian, thank you for joining me today. How are you doing?
Jim, honored to be here, man. Thank you so much for that generous intro.
You're very welcome. I've told guests before, I think we may have talked about it on the intro call. That's one of my favorite parts of this whole thing that I do is writing those bios or those intros. It's a lot of fun. I was never given a chance to be a very creative person in my previous careers. So this is my chance to really exploit that. And I have a blast with it.
That's awesome. You know, it reminds me of, do you know a guy named Tom Bilyeu? Does that name ring a bell?
No.
So Tom is another guy that does intros like that. His was called, it's called Impact Studio or something now. He was a co-founder of the company Quest, which was like a nutrition bar.
Okay.
And they sold it for like $1 billion. And like literally sold it for $1 billion. It was like the fastest growing nutrition bar. This was like 10 years ago. Anyway, he's an interesting cat, a little bit, weird in a good way. But he has always just blown the doors off when it comes to intros of his guests. And it is fun to, because in the world of, and this probably pertains to our conversation today, in the world of our like breakneck pace, like how often does anybody stop and really just part of it was to serve the podcast to let them know who I am, but really you wrote it that way to bless me.
Right.
And how often do we stop and just intentionally bless someone?
Awesome point. I mean, and
thank you.
Yes, let's dive into that a little bit. First, Adrian, I want to hear your journey. I mean, you and I have talked. We had our pre-call, but your journey is one that really blows people's socks off when they hear it. So, in your own words, I mean, I can write all I want, but that's not your stories. Tell us your story.
Yeah. Well, let's see where to begin. I mean, and I'll try to give like a medium length version, and then we can double click on anything you want. So, I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Illinois, 8,000 people in my hometown, when everybody's home. And, an hour and a half east of St. Louis, 4 hours south of Chicago, second born son of Jim and Angie Koehler, both public school teachers, great human beings. Members, investing members of the community, like very involved in all things. I mean, as school teachers, especially in like small town America, you hold a unique spot, especially in Salem, because my father and mother both were able to like teach 3 different generations because they have kids so young.
Wow.
Right. So it's like they have their first year in teaching. They had little Tommy, and Tommy got married. And when he was 18, had, Susie. And then Susie came up and Susie had a kid named Toby. And, so you really get to be ingrained in family life. And so everybody knew Jim and Angie. And from that, but beyond that, like they were involved, and from listeners, you could tell I had some kind of, I don't know, religious history. I was I'd say I was socialized into Christianity, and they were a part of a church. They started a church when I was like 2 years old. They left the church with a group of 25 people and started a new church, and so they were core members to that new church. And so I grew up there. I Evergreen Christian Church, still standing today. My parents are still there, exact same seats for the last 45 years.
Wow.
And that community has gone up and down. It had different iterations with different pastors and such, as you can imagine. But it's like when I walk back and out coming up at the end of December, when I take my kids back, we're recording this middle of December. When I go back at the end of December, I'll walk in and I'll see so many faces that I've seen as long as I had eyeballs to see, which is kind of a unique, pretty cool thing. It's like, and they're older now. All those folks are like in their late 70s. Like my parents are in their mid 70s, and all of them are like mid to late 70s. And it's just really cool. It's cool for them because, one of their sons has come home, in that world, they'll say one of their Timothys, which is a biblical reference. Like one of the ones that they invested in and, and served and helped and gave opportunities to, has gone off to the world, gone off to, the God's forsaken place called California, which they've never been to, but they love to judge. Because they watch Fox News too much, but then they come back and, and I'm there and they're proud of me and it's awesome. And I walk in there with my kids and they'll tell all the little, very flattering and very sweet stories to my kids about, when your dad was this age, and they tell some funny story. And anyway, so I joked that I was like born into an episode of Friday Night Lights, and that was kind of like what it was. Cause like my father coached, so he was a school teacher, but he was like the coach teacher guy, he's like the short bike shorts in the 80s and the whistle and all that. But I grew up going to watching softball games, watching him. One of my early memories had to be when my father had blown out his knee in a church softball game, and he's like writhing in pain. It's like when Superman actually got hit by the bullet. I remember that. I remember the shag carpet in my living room, and he's like anyway, got his knee fixed. But point being is that we were very much a sports family. And I said I was the youngest of 2. My older brother, he was a hoss, we would have called him. He was a big dude and set all the records in every sport he played, which was wonderful. And then it helped create a worldview for me, very competitive, always kind of striving to catch up. And I didn't have the genetics my brother had. I guess I literally did, but I wasn't big. I was small. And, I did have the upper hand on him academically. That part came really easily for me, not as easily for him. But in athletics, I had to like catch up, and I had to outwork the crowd, which, was hard at the time. Number one. Number two, huge advantage because I learned things through discipline and sacrifice that he never had to learn. He blew out, pretty quickly. We both went on to play college sports. He was done after his freshman year once it required some, sacrifice. I loved that. And I was used to outworking the competition just to keep up. But then finally, got the edge. But I still wasn't as fast as the kids out of Chicago and couldn't jump as high and all that, but I'd outwork them in the weight room, and I'd get there early to practice and stay late and all that kind of stuff. So it gave me a big advantage. But we were a very sports family. So we grew up playing all the sports. My father literally built the baseball diamond in town. Like it's in one of them now. Well, they don't play at those fields anymore, but one of the new fields, it literally is Jim Kahler Field, because he's, you know, such an icon. I joke that my father's like the George Bailey of my hometown, as It's a Wonderful Life reference. He's like that guy. If you walked into Walmart with my parents, you know, that's an hour and a half affair, no matter what you want to do, because everybody stops and talks to them, and they've got relationships with everybody. Just kind of painting a picture. Like it was all white town, which I didn't really know the difference back then. But I did know quickly and over time that I liked diversity. I really liked diversity of thought, and I liked diversity of worldview. And I could tell that everybody in my town, I mean, it seemed like everybody thought the same way. And I thought, no problem, but I already understand that. What do other people think? You know, what else is there to see out there? And I was always, you know, curious about other perspectives, which, you know, started to generate a theme for my life that still goes on today. And it's I think one of my superpowers is actually seeing other perspectives, honoring other perspectives, even on a day-to-day basis. Now, nobody's perspective will ever insult me or upset me, because I'm just really curious about it. And I'm naturally kind of empathetic, and that's like the truest definition of empathy, is to see the world from someone else's shoes and honor that. Yeah. Not that you have to agree with it or co-sign on it or not you know, it's like, you don't, but can I see it from their perspective, which is distinct from if I was in their shoes. Most people think empathy is like that. If I was in their shoes, what would I do? That's not empathy. No. If I am their shoes, how do I see it? And how does it make sense to me? Because everybody makes the best decision they see in the moment. So how are they seeing it that makes that make sense? And can I see that and honor it? And then can I work with them from where they are versus from some judgmental place of where I think they should be? Yeah. Anyway, back to the story. So I loved that. Loved growing up there. Really charmed life. You know, did not have a hard upbringing at all. My parents sacrificed for me. Parents are still married. You know, some really cool, you know, unique shit these days. Yeah. And a lot of stability. And my parents, while they gave themselves to us, there were obviously some deficits of like what I wanted or needed that wasn't available. Sure. And, you know, we were a pretty quiet house. We didn't deal with conflict very well. We didn't deal with it on the surface. You know, and I wanted things from my father that he just couldn't give me. And I didn't know it. I didn't know that at the time. It was just, you know, there was a gap there, mostly around mentoring and mostly around education. Like I have a couple kids now. I have a 9-year-old son and a 7-year-old girl. And I love talking with them about the intricacies, as much as they have awareness of, about what they think and how they feel and what makes them think and feel that way. And what if they, you know, it's like the whole exploration of being, really. Like I was always seeking that, because early in life, I was philosophical, I was psychological, I was like serious about life. People told me from the beginning, you've got an old soul, which is usually code for, you know, not like a kid. Like, why don't you like be more like a kid? And I was always like, no, I want to grow up. I want to think like an adult. I want to talk to the adults. I don't want to go play tag. That's what little kids do. I want to go sit and have a theological discussion, you know? Yeah. Or I'd sit around at the dinner table. It's like, can we turn off Wheel of Fortune? Can we talk? You know, I was always that. I wanted some depth and sincerity, which was a little much for my family, which, you know, I wore that for a long time. Like I was a little much. And then I just realized over time that I'm an acquired taste and I'm not for everybody. I like the deep end. I can talk about the Dodgers if you want. I mean, I don't know much about them, but I can bullshit about the Dodgers. That's great. I can talk about the weather if you want. I don't know much about it because I don't look at the weather ever, or the price of gas. My dad's always calling me and saying, hey, what's the price of gas? Dad, I don't know. I don't care. I make good money. I don't care about the price of gas. I'm going to pay it. I'm going to pay it. So
I have to drive. I live in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I don't care, you know, and I will not drive across town like he does. It's a small town, but he'll drive across town to save a couple pennies. I will not. I will pay for convenience. It's right here. I'm paying. If you have to pay an extra $1 a gallon, I do not care. Nope. Anyway, so I got out of deciding where to go to school. I, you know, had worked hard enough that I got opportunities to go play football in college, which was a shock to me. and a huge gift to me. And I was the first one, to be able to go do that. My brother got offers, and he played a freshman year, but anyway, got pursued to go play college. I played college at Millikan University, which is a small D3 school, so not a huge leap up, but huge for me at the time. And
it's a huge opportunity. Yeah.
Huge, like 1% of people do it, and even less now. But went on to play there. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. Like it's shocking now. Like as I think about the conversations I have with my stepkids, I've got a couple of stepkids, 18 and 16, and the conversations I will have with my 9-year-old and 7-year-old, where they'll go to school wherever they want around the world, and I'll think that's awesome. And when I talked about going to school, it was like stay close, because there's kind of people naturally give what they want themselves, and my parents wanted me close, and they love being involved, which is wonderful. Like that comes out of a really sweet, but there wasn't a heart for adventure. There wasn't a heart for exploration in my family, in my growing up, and a lot of who I am now. I think this happens pretty naturally. We decide to become what wasn't there before. So even when I just did a core values conversation with my 9 and 7-year-old, because I'm a coach, and what do? We sit down and talk about family core values. So, they made their lists of, I just said, what kind of family do you want to be in? If you had the perfect family, perfect environment to like grow up in, describe it. What would it be like? And it was amazing for this 9 and 7-year-old. That's all I said to them. And they sit there and they made long notes. They wrote a lot longer than I did. And they came up with lists of 30 characteristics, which I thought was beautiful. Even my 7-year-old. And, we came up with let's see if I can come up with the top 5. The first one is gratitude. The second one is be a team player. The third one is be creative. The fourth one is active. And the fifth one is adventurous.
Okay. So I like those. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, great. So I bring it up because adventurous is in our top 5. It definitely wouldn't have been in our top 5 with me growing up. We did stuff, and we went on vacation, every year, but we went to the same place or this, whatever. It wasn't like exploration and new, we didn't have an appreciation of the new. I can't get enough of the new. I love new shit. I love meeting new people. I love trying new food. I love going new places. Anything new is so exciting for me. And we know from the neuroscience now that over time, time speeds up. Like people say, time flies. Why it flies, neurologically speaking, is because we have less first-time experiences. So if you want time to slow down as an adult, listeners, if you want time to slow down, go do something new. It generates almost like a character, chapter shift in a book. So if you if you're bored, you just don't have new things going on. If time's flying, you don't have new things because your brain pays attention to something new. It doesn't know what to do with it. So it generates a whole shift in the experience of time. So anyway, let's see. Went on to school, didn't know what I wanted to be. Also didn't do a massive amount of exploration with my parents about that. I just don't think they were school teachers. They'd done it for 30, 40 years. They hadn't been in much, exploration about that either. So, and they, we didn't have a large access to a bunch of people that did a lot of things. So anyway, went off to school. They are naturally, we're thinking about what's a good steady career. I think it's a nice parental, concern. I was pre-med in college for like a semester, and because I liked all the science stuff, and I took as many biology classes as I could, and that part really clicked with me. And I'm naturally very curious about all that, and I was good for whatever reason. My brain's good at memorizing things, so I was good at rocking it on tests and that kind of thing. But I was pre-med thinking, I could be a doctor. That would be fun. But then when I got into it, I realized I'm not like these people. It's like I was like biology pre-med, and it wasn't my crowd, that's for sure. And then I thought I really don't want to go into school for 7 years. So serendipitously, that's a long time. Yeah. And I know now, I don't think I knew back then, but I know now it's like, doctors see the world from research and data. That's where they start the conversation. Eventually, serendipitously, my roommate in college, freshman year, his father ran the ER in Gary, Indiana. So tough ER, rough ER, like gunshots, stabbing, all that. That sounded interesting to me. But So anyway, it was perfect because I thought, oh, this is like Dr. Light. I'll go get a nursing major, and it sounded fun. And I know nursing starts from the human and then works its way back to the clinical.
Sure.
Doctors start at the clinical, work their way down. Sometimes they make it. A lot of doctors don't ever make it to the human being. They're just there with a case number and a diagnosis, and they're plugging in. They're just solving a problem, or it's like they're unlocking a lock instead of like connecting to a human being. And I probably got that from my parents, always very people oriented. And I got that from my faith background as well. I think if you're religious, that's a roll of the dice. But if you're somebody that really attempts to love God and whatever that means to you, and then love what God loves, I think at the core of any religion, God loves people.
Absolutely.
And loves being a part of helping people redeem themselves, put themselves back together. And, the biggest concern, I think, the big arc of Christianity, I'm still a guy that follows Jesus. I'm not that religious, but the big arc is to be a part of the redemption of the world, like put the world back together.
Sure.
And so that happened. That's a big macro conversation, but even on a micro conversation, how do you make something better? How do you how do you order the chaos and release beauty? My business partner would say that's his big motto in life. That's what he's called to, is order chaos and release beauty. Anyway.
Okay.
I was a nursing major in college. The last half, moved on to Chicago after that because I was dating a girl from Chicago, and we broke up, of course, 2 weeks after I got there. But I got a lot of offers, and I fell in love with the children's hospital in Chicago. It just, it's kids, man, like kids. I mean,
absolutely.
It's such an honorable opportunity, scary, but you're never lacking meaning, because a kid.
Sure.
For the most part, a kid would never deserve whatever's happening to them. If you got some 90-year-old with emphysema and they smoked for 50 years, welcome.
Right.
You earned it. But for the kid, they never earned anything. So, and I loved the complexity, right? So it's like the kid is sick, but you're actually dealing with the parents as well. They're always there at the bedside. And, and you're dealing a lot, most of the time, with a mom and a dad, and both of them, the male and female genders, usually respond to chaos distinctly. Usually the mom was frantic and looking for control and looking for answers and very heightened emotions. Usually the dad was quiet and to himself and angry, and because he couldn't fix the thing. And anyway, just those are big stereotypes, but that's the way it usually lined out. And I really loved the opportunity to come in and give them a fresh experience. Like, okay, cool. Like I'm a subject knowledge expert. I know everything about this, and I know what's going on for your child. And just let's sit down. First off, it's going to be okay. And second, let's talk about how you guys can participate in these 12 hours that I'm with you, so that you can get the most out of this. And so that you can be there for your kid. You can actually, be there for yourself as well. Because there's ways to show up that actually you'll miss the opportunities. And worst case, if the kid is tanking, which happened from time to time, I had lots of kids die on my watch, because nothing we could do about it. You want to be present for that. And we naturally want to run from pain, naturally want to run from that's the worst case scenario. Every parent's worst nightmare is a kid dying. So, being able to, usher in a real presence for them and being that calming. Some in the bio was about, being calm in the midst of chaos. And when you're in the pediatric intensive care, it is chaos.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, it was crazy. So I really enjoyed that, but I didn't want to be a nurse. That's the ironic about it. I got a nursing degree, but I was not at all interested in like doing a 20-year, 30-year career as a nurse, wearing scrubs every day, because I want to, keep increasing my, I want to climb the ladder, if you will. And if you go up in the ladder in that world, you're just going to go schedule vacations and write policies and procedures. And I'm not into that. I'm not administrative at all.
Right.
And I don't like doing all that stuff. I'm not detail oriented that way. I don't care, so I knew I didn't want to do that, but I knew that a nursing degree would give me a license literally, but then give me freedom to go travel the world and go do whatever I wanted.
Yeah.
So I was in Chicago working there, was serving at a church in Chicago. And I, was a musician back then as well, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, very involved in the community and loved it. and loved being involved, loved helping people. Even though I was, I became a member at that church like the second week I was there, which was, I guess, baffling to them. I remember them saying,
Wow.
"Who's been here? Who's been here for 10 years?" And some people would raise their hand. There's people that are like going to this membership class or whatever, and worked it all the way down to, they gave her an award for who'd been there the longest and who'd been there the shortest. And I just been there 2 weeks, and they were like, "What? You're becoming a member after 2 weeks?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm that kind of guy. I'm like an all-in dude. So if I'm going to be here, I'm going to be a member for sure." And long story short, I was with that church on a trip to India to go do some medical stuff and play some music.
Wow.
and all this kind of stuff. And while I was there, I heard a CD. Remember those? A CD of a talk of this guy named Erwin McManus. And he'd given this talk, this sermon, called "The Barbarian's Way Out of Civilization." And it was essentially a view of this Jesus figure, of, how he didn't come to start a religion. He actually came to start a revolution. And for my 23-year-old years, I thought, oh, I
That's
like that.
interesting.
That's cooler than like go fit in and be a good boy. Like that's all boring to me. But starting a revolution, I like a revolution. What is that about? Long story short, came back from that trip, read every book Erwin had read, and he was brilliant. And I quickly, in the next 6 months, packed my bags and moved to Los Angeles, because I thought,
wow,
it's kind of a little bit of a theme of my life. I've always just looked for the next person that I wanted to be like. So always searching for mentors, and then would go do whatever they were doing just to be close to them and pick up how they saw the world, pick up what they were doing, contribute to what they were doing. And so I moved out to LA, and I was an intern. And while I was here, I did some nursing stuff to kind of pay the bills. And then while I was here, they created this master's program called the Protege program. So we actually, Mosaic was unique in the sense that it was in the center of LA. We didn't own a building, which is easy to not do in LA because it's really expensive to get real estate and such. We had these pop-ups all over the place, like 7 different locations around Los Angeles. And on Sundays, we just pop up a service like in a nightclub or at an old folks home or in a high school or whatever. So it was a very flat organization, and we needed a lot of help, needed a lot of volunteers to step up, and they called volunteer staff at that point. And but for the internship called the Protege program, they assigned you something to go do. And so I worked on college campuses, creating healthy spiritual community on campus, which was great, extremely entrepreneurial. I literally walked on all these campuses. I was given 5 schools. The guy who was my mentor at the time said to me this exact quote: "Adrian, we want you to go to these 5 schools. We don't have any presence there, and we don't think it can be done, but you're our best shot." And I thought, you are speaking my love language. Thank you. It's impossible. It's impossible. Thank you, sir. His name is Eric Bryant. He's a sweetheart. So anyway, I'd walk on these college campuses and find a way to like start building community. And we'd have the international food nights and end up becoming like Bible study type stuff. But seeing life transformation, lives of these kids, like health and their own spiritual, we were very open and very inviting before that was PC and cool to do. We were just into it. Like wherever you're at, it's a perfect way to start. Nothing wrong with where you're starting. It's like, but where are you headed? That's where we're inviting you, is to know a God that loves you. It's really cool. If it's true, it's really cool. If it's not true, then fine. But if it's true, holy cow, it can change your world. I know it changed my world. So long story short, on that side, did that for a couple of years. I'd always had activism in my bones. I'd always, even in Chicago, like homeless people were some of my best friends, just because I cared and I thought it was fun and cool to like get to know these guys and like, and on a first name basis and have dinner with them. And, I'd always go to 7-Eleven, buy hot dogs, and we'd sit down and talk. And when I was brand new to the city, after I broke up with that girl, I didn't have any friends yet. So Crockett and Blackjack, these 2 characters that sit on my corner, they were my buddies. So we'd get 7-Eleven hot dogs and drink Cokes, and they'd teach me about the city. And I just loved that. I just loved it. Nobody taught me that. I just thought it was cool to get to know these guys, and they loved it, of course. And I loved it too. Anyway, helping make a difference in the lives of people who felt outside or who were marginalized or who were abused or left out. I've just always gotten a thrill out of that. And I knew it was a good thing to do, but I didn't do it. I also just got a thrill. It was like so fun to do. And I really loved inviting other people who were scared to death to come do it with me. So long story short, after I'd done that internship at Mosaic, they said, hey, we know you, because I'd already started to build teams to go serve in the city. And they just said, would you stay? Would you help formalize this? And Mosaic, it was about 3,000 people. So fast forward a couple of years, we had a whole network. And so I got to do what I do well, which is build community and build networks and build trust and build leadership teams and then generate possibilities for people to get connected. I'm in that kind of connector. I'm that connector type guy, Malcolm Gladwell. And I love that. So about 2,000 people a year would get out and go serve. And I knew, I would just tell them, I said, give me an hour of your week and it'll be the best hour of your week. I promise you. I'll give you an experience that you're going to talk about at all the cocktail parties. You're not going to talk about how much you hate work. You're going to talk about the fact of, you mentored this homeless kid and he's changing your life. You came to change his, but he changed yours. So and took teams overseas and would be able to mobilize people in emergency response. I could meld my healthcare background with, what's happening in culture at the time. So like, Hurricane Katrina happened, was on a team of 20 people that went, the earthquake happened in Haiti. I took a team of like 6-8 doctors to go down and set up a clinic, 5 days after, like, they just call me, Adrian, what are we going to do? And I'd say, give me 24 hours. And I'd figure it all out. So it was kind of like, felt like, Jason Bourne at the time. It was like an impossible mission, rock and roll, like, or an episode of 24, like start the clock, us against the world, which was just great for a young, ambitious, smart enough kid in his 20s to be able to do that and have access to all these amazing human beings that I didn't, I was just part of the community. But really learned how to connect with people deeply and quickly, and loved that. And I did that for a good while. Through that, I'd helped a guy come to faith or, take steps in his own spiritual journey. His father was a billionaire, so he was a millionaire just because he was born. He had a big trust fund and such, and he wasn't like a crazy trust fund kid. He was more troubled and more introspective. So he was like a guy that, like, would spend weeks in a cabin reading Kierkegaard or Hegel or, philosophy. And he'd gone to NYU, a Jewish atheist kid, went to NYU and studied Western religion, so very much a seeker. And he asked me, hey, I want to give some money away. Where do I give it? Where do I write the checks? And that started a whole new conversation, because I said, no. We need to slow down. Like, let's talk about money. Let's talk about the purpose of money. Let's talk about the gift of money and how you could, and then let's talk about you and what you care about. And, he didn't really know what he cared about because he was new in this conversation. He first realized there's a whole world out there. And then, there's a bunch of need out there. Like, how about we do something that you care about? And so I needed to take him around the world, to expose him, to give him opportunities to go see. So I took him around Africa several times. And I was very well networked in LA, obviously, from my work at the church. And he ended up loving to work with people who have really blown it, that needed a second chance. So in that realm, it meant we started by giving a huge grant to Homeboy Industries, which in LA is very famous for Father Greg Boyle. It's like an incubator, entrepreneurial incubator on the east side of LA, tough side of LA. And it was like kind of one of the pet projects of the mayor. We literally put a cafe for them in City Hall. So $250,000, put a cafe, like a still to this day, a floor below the mayor's office. There's an ex-con slinging coffee, which I think is awesome.
I think I just went there. I was in LA. I was flying out of LAX last week, and the gate
Homeboy Bakery, and at the American Airlines Terminal 4, for sure. So it's same organization. So fast forward, I followed some nuns into prison, because Catholics have this whole restorative justice bend to them, which is cool.
Right.
They knew all these lifers, and they had this like pen pal type thing, which is cool, but whatever. And simultaneously, I met this guy named Dan Tacchini. Dan had been doing management consulting work for a long time. Also had been doing this gang intervention work with mostly juveniles, mostly on the East Coast, out of Lynn, Massachusetts, with a group called Straight Ahead. But he had created a program called Ready for Life. Now, in that world, what they study is recidivism. Recidivism is what's the percentage or how likely is someone to come back to prison after they've been released? And average in America, at least at the time, was 87%. So 87% of guys, if you let them out, they're going to come back. And it's not a big mystery why. Prisons are actually criminal factories. They don't, they don't help anybody, right? They make people more criminal, and they're full of criminals, obviously. So, but with his program called Ready for Life, if you went through that, spent 3 days in a room with Dan, the recidivism of those people went from 87% down to 12%.
Astronomical.
Yes. Neck breaking.
That's
results.
Mind blowing.
Yeah. So, because the core of that conversation is around one distinction, those 3 days, it's just all around this conversation, this exercise we call victim responsible. And I won't get into all the depths of it, but essentially the theme is if someone feels victimized, they act victimized, and victimized people in their own mind have justified that they can perpetrate, right? They will continue to be criminal because the world did this to them, their dad, the color of their skin, blah, 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 whatever the story is. If they feel like they're a victim, they will naturally go victimize other people, hurt people, blah, blah, blah. If you shift from a victim mindset to a responsible mindset, that's what makes the difference, right? So, in prison, we'd always say, you want to be in prison. And they say, no, I don't want to be here, blah, blah, blah. And I say, well, you're here, so you must want to be here. Let's talk about it. And after a little bit of time, they'll cop to the fact that they made choices all along the way. There's like hundreds of choices they made to earn prison. Now, what do you want to do moving forward? They say, I just want to I don't want to get out. And that's not much of a vision, just to want to get out. What are you going to do when you get out? That's why most people go back, is because their vision is to get out, but they don't have a vision for who they'll be and what they'll do once they get out, right? There's no commitment to further them, let alone to heal their pain, let alone to heal the community that they wounded, let alone to, there's like lots of things. And there's purpose baked in all that. There's like dignity baked in all that. And so once you give them an appetite for dignity and purpose, man, people shift. I mean, all those. So we did these trainings with these lifers. There was 30 lifers. All of them were murderers. And they were probably most of them late 30s, early 40s. When they were 16, 17, 20, they'd killed somebody. A lot of it gang, a lot of it group, a lot of all that. Yeah. But they saw the idea that they could actually, what they were dying to do with their kids, what they were dying to do with their community, they weren't with their community or with their kids anymore, but they were surrounded by 2,000 inmates that they could make a difference with. And they could father a ton of kids. There's a bunch of brand new kids coming in, and all of them could stand in as the kid they wish they could take care of, which is out there. They could actually treat their kid right in front of them in the next cell like it was their own. And once they did that, their life was forever shifted. They were still incarcerated for a while. They all got, every single one of them, next time they got up for the parole board after they got out of our training, was released. Wow. They'd been gone up to the parole board several times, just like Shawshank Redemption, refuse. But after they come through our training, they had such a change of heart and change of soul, and then change of mind, like they could actually speak from an authentic place of responsibility and commitment for the future. They all got released, 100% of them. And even today, even if people want to listen, so we've got a podcast called the Naked Leadership Podcast. A recent episode, probably 2 months ago, there's an interview with a guy named Richard Morales. He was one of the guys that was in prison. So if you want to hear a guy, I mean, we're all crying on that podcast. So if you want to hear me cry, feel free. But it's just listening to this guy's story. He got out and started a whole thing just like what we trained him to do. And he and his organization called CROP, I forget what it stands for, they just got written into the California budget for $20 million. Not given a grant, written into the budget because of their work with criminals. Because if they go through similar to ours, if they go through their trainings, they don't go back. So anyway, state of California says, okay, these guys are great. Even when they were doing these trainings in prison, local universities would send their college students to the leadership trainings that our guys were putting on because they were so effective. So anyway, so I did that for a good while. I loved it. As we moved on, of course, hired the staff, built the board, got all the vision and mission, blah, blah, all that stuff in place. The guy that had given the money, he got really involved, which is wonderful. I mean, I'd done my job. He moved from being like a board member to like really being in the room and love the work. That's really my job. With that, though, he wanted to really focus. He wanted to work with this group of people in this prison, which is awesome, except for me, boring. I love new stuff, as we talked about earlier. So, and I wanted to go change the world. I'm like, we've got this much money in the bank, and you got me at the helm. We can write laws. You want to go to the White House next week? I can figure that out, But anyway, he didn't want to do that kind of work. He just wanted to work with these guys, which is wonderful. But it meant over time, it's time for me to go. I had gone through all these trainings that Dan had put on. That business partner of mine, he was doing all these public trainings, like a 3-day training and a 4-day training and a marriage thing and a coach's academy. I'd gone through all of it, partially to get to know him and get to know the work, but also just for myself. I'm a nerd for that kind of stuff. I mean, I coach for a living now, so I love all the personal development stuff, especially that had a challenge baked into it, which Dan's stuff always does. And I love a challenge. Welcome to being an athlete. So what was I going to do now? I could go back to nursing. That would have been boring. I could go do, philanthropy, which usually is very administrative and kind of spreadsheet based. And, that's all boring to me. I could go work in any church in America, but most churches wouldn't take me. And so now what I'm going to do? Well, I've gone through this coach's academy. I'll just go be a coach. And that was 13 years ago. And so I just, decided I was going to be a coach. And I knew enough to be dangerous, but I had a great network. I'd already been a coach to so many people, so it wasn't a big jump for people. It kind of made sense to them, and I just had to figure it out. But it worked pretty quickly. I'm really good. Like if we sit next to each other on a plane, if I'm in the mood, you're probably going to be a coaching client by the end of the plane ride. Like I just love that. I love that challenge. Sure. I'm an evangelist naturally for whatever I'm involved with. I love development of those conversations. I guess you'd call it sales. But I don't ever see it as selling. I see it as motivating people to go make courageous decisions, which most people want to do. They're just scared to death to do. And I love that. I love championing people. Now I call it fierce advocacy. Over time, as you kind of get the brand figured out and like really what makes me come alive is, I can be really brash. I can be really straightforward. I'm naturally really frank. I'm really loving. So that's what makes it work for people because they can sense that I love them. But I'm also like, hey, man, I think you're full of shit. And I don't say that because you're wrong for it. I'm just saying you're lying to yourself, and I know you know it. So why don't we get real? Like I'm that guy. I'm like the smelling salts. So for people, and I've just decided that that's okay. And so I spend my time doing that. So now I coach mostly founders of companies and come in and train their leadership teams and align their teams and assemble them or disassemble them and just have a ball doing it.
That's awesome. So as I read in the intro, you've had some super high profile organizations, right? Yeah. Navy SEALs, Virgin Hyperloop, the Oprah Winfrey Network. I mean, these are names that I would struggle to find anybody who doesn't know what they are, right? Yeah. At least in the US.
Yeah.
In these conversations with these leaders, what have you identified as one of the most challenging aspects of leadership that makes or breaks company culture?
Say it again.
What have you identified with these high profile that everybody knows about, clients of yours?
Yeah.
What have you identified as an aspect of leadership that can make or break company culture?
Yeah. Well, man, there's like so many answers to this question. What makes or breaks, especially in high profile? Well, how much do they drink their own Kool-Aid is really, I think, the first thing.
Okay.
So, especially once you've become elite status, the temptation is to play not to lose. So it's not lose what we had. And so therefore you are looking for threats. Possibilities look like threats. People with inventive ideas look like threats. And we become, like in most of the companies you've listed, they are built around a personality. Sure. Like a founder, like in their vision. And so it becomes this kind of cult of personality. And then you what's that distinction? So if you're either going to be like personality based or what I call principle based.
Okay.
And so the risk is that you end up worshiping the founder's ideas instead of continuing to raise the bar about how good could it get around here, even beyond the capacity of the founder. And every great organization, the beautiful thing about group dynamics is as a whole, we're so much better than we are as an individual. Yep. But that requires stepping into, and disrupting what are previously known as like sacred conversations. Like, no, but that's not the way this person says it's done.
Yeah.
And okay, well, what you end up creating for most of these is you end up losing top tier talent, because top tier talent wants to continue to raise the bar and they want to create their own name. They might be partnered with this person, but they're there to also do their thing, and they know how significant they want to be. And so if they're in a stifled organization where they're being treated like tools, like means to an end, instead of treated as human beings that have a lot to say and have something to contribute to the vision, then they leave. So I would say those are the first two things that come to mind. It becomes this very kind of play not to lose, personality based thing, and then you end up losing. You can't retain high end talent because you end up trying to protect the brand instead of continuing to reinvent the brand.
Got it. So let's dive into your process a little bit specifically. You brought up something right at the beginning there, and we said we were going to circle back to it. It was part of your process. I'm not remembering what it was though, Adrian. I was so focused on your story, I totally forgot what it was. So tell us in broader terms, what is your process with your clients?
Yeah. And sorry, I just realized that once I got done, it's like, I was just talking for like 40 minutes. Wow. Sorry for all that. I promised like a medium. I can't imagine going longer than that. So my process, so sorry, listeners, if you're still here, I'm very proud of you. So the process, well, almost 100% of the people I talk to are talking to me because somebody they know has worked with me or worked with my team. So it's all very highly referral based, and that's been on purpose because I don't want to spend my time talking strangers into anything. It's great for me to work with somebody that I already have trust established, and they kind of know what they're getting into by the time they're talking to me. And they're already, typically they've been complaining about something over lunch, and one of their colleagues who works with me says, "Hey, you need to talk to Adrian. Like, I don't know what to say to what you're saying, but he does. And why don't you guys talk?" And so that's usually how the process begins. And in that initial conversation, I'm always doing a handful of things. First off, I'm building rapport with them and getting to know them and listening and all that kind of stuff. But quickly, I'm paying attention to things that they aren't paying attention to. So I'm always I'm listening from this very distinct formula in my mind, and the formula goes like this: P plus E plus O over C. So P is patterns. I'm noticing what patterns people speak in or what they behave in, because we're all very pattern machines as human beings. So I'm paying attention to patterns, because whatever patterns you have, that creates your future. So whatever those patterns are, because we all have patterns. So I'm listening for patterns. I'm listening for E, which is emphasis. What are they emphasizing? Which is also code for what do they want the listener to notice? And that's always strategic, right? So they've got a certain aspect of the story that they're really being very dramatic about, or they might be saying it 4 or 5 times. I'm noticing what they're emphasizing, because that's what either they consciously or unconsciously are really focused on. And there's always upsides and downsides to that. That's E for emphasis. O is for omission. I'm paying attention to what they're not saying. So if they're in the middle of a story and are giving half of the perspective, let's say they're talking about their recent conversation with their co-founder, and they never mentioned what their co-founder thought. They're just giving their side of the story. I'll say, well, hold on. Okay, but let's go back. You said that. What did they say after you said that? And they've left that out. Or, they're telling a story about a project launch and they left out their contribution to the breakdown and the project launch. So I'm going to notice and ask about what they're omitting. And I'm always going to put the formula is put all that patterns and emphasis and omission over context. Context is the aim, whatever the aim is, the stated goal, the vision. So, because that's what gives meaning to all the other things. Because if my vision is X, and that's when they're speaking, I'll see what they're describing as current reality. The meaning for that is just in the context of how close or how far that is from their stated aim. And most people, even the most ambitious people, are usually very foggy about what they want. They're really clear about what they're complaining about, but they're really foggy about what they want. And so I really want to help them get really clear about that. And sometimes that does the trick. Because, I assert we all live with a vision. As mammals, we all live with intention. We can't not. That's what sets us apart as a genus, would that be, of you know, as a class of animals, we all live with intention. And so even if we're unclear, then that means that confusion is the vision. So if I don't know what I want, my intention is to not know what I want. This is a counterintuitive view, but the intention is then to not know what I want. And I'll say, well, it sounds like your vision is to be unclear. And they'll say, no, I want to get clear. I say, okay, great. Well, let's play a game. Why don't we actually entertain reality, not your fantasy about reality? So reality says you like being unclear, because how long has it been since you sat down and had a goal session with your team? Oh, it's been a couple of years. Great. So you've actually generated a whole culture of not being clear. So let's say you do that on purpose. Let's say if you do it on purpose, there has to be payoffs to it. Great. What are the hidden payoffs to being unclear? And they'll say there are none. And I say, great. I'm asking you though, play the game. If there were some payoffs to being unclear, what are the payoffs? And then we'll slowly walk through that. And there are a ton of them, a ton of hidden payoffs to being unclear. Like, I get licensed to do whatever I want. I'm not being held responsible for anything. I can have a very personality-based culture. I get to be erratic, and I get to, take somebody's head off because it's not aligning with the thing that I want them to do, but I haven't told them. But, they don't really have a chance. So I get to kind of be a diva. Anyway, there's I could go on for a list of 30 things. Yeah. There's always payoffs to being unclear. There's always prices as well. So then we talk about that. What pain in their life do they have because of their up until now chosen strategy to approach the work and to approach themselves? Now, that sets up a powerful context. I know how they've hung in that conversation if I want to work with them, and they'll know for sure if they want to work with me, because I'm asking them to consider things that they've not considered before. And if they aren't open to it at all, no problem. But don't work with me. I'm like the most expensive pain in the ass that you could have, But if you want this type of like insight and want this type of possibility that comes out of insight, I'm your guy. Because because I've anything my clients are struggling with, I've struggled with it, right? And I'm cool with talking about it. Like it's just part of it. Welcome to humanity. And they usually need. It's kind of lonely at the top, that whole cliche. I say it's as lonely as we want it to be. Yeah. And it can be lonely at the top. And I've had that experience. Other people have had that experience, but it's only lonely because I haven't invited anybody else into my world. And as soon as I let somebody into my world, it's less lonely. And if I want to, I can bring a whole senior leadership team into my world, but I'd have to risk not looking good. And looking good is one of our survival needs. Look good, feel good, be right, be in control. So if I want to survive, I want to look good. I won't share with anybody my struggles. They all know it, by the way. I always say that, like, when a leader has a revelation, they're the last one to the party because everybody else has known it for a long time. It's like, oh, I don't really know what to do. It's like they finally say, I don't really know how to deal with Tom. I know we all hate Tom. We've hated him for 5 years. You're the one that finally is talking about it. So anyway, that sets up a powerful context. We actually, you're asking about process. We use a leadership assessment tool. We've got access. We're only one of 150, what do they call it, vendors in the U.S. that gets access to this tool called the Harrison Assessment. It works in the same framework as the DISC or as StrengthsFinder, which are much more common. Those two only gauge, the StrengthsFinder gauges 34, the DISC only 4. This is 164 different traits. So what it gauges is what somebody's preference is. And they've studied through this thing called the enjoyment performance theory, that if someone's spending 70% of their time doing what they prefer doing, they have an increased chance of success of 300 to 400%. So pretty big deal. If it's true, then it's a pretty big deal. But we don't have language for it. So it's going to give us language. It gives us objective language, and actually also lays out 23 of these in these 12 paradoxes, because one of them's on there twice, of tensions that every single human being that's leading, we all have to manage these certain tensions. They are not going away. Like, for example, the tension in communication. It's how much do I prefer being frank and how much do I prefer being diplomatic? That's a tension. That's not going away. And we can either be high on both, or most of us, we're imbalanced. We're higher on frankness and lower on diplomacy, for example. That makes you blunt. If you're higher on diplomacy and shorter on frankness, that makes you evasive. That's a reality. People feel that. That's got an effect. Yeah. And under stress, people flip to the other side. So the evasive guy that's not been fully forthright the whole time, when he goes under stress, he's going to go off on somebody.
Got it.
under stress.
Got it.
Anyway, there's 12 of these paradoxes. So we will, back to the process, we use the Harrison assessment for one-on-one coaching, obviously. And I can get into what that process is if you want. But then also we work with teams. So we'll take everybody, like if I'm doing an executive offsite with 8 people, they'll all take the Harrison assessment. We will debrief them all. They'll understand their own findings. And then in the room on the first day, we're going to put up all these paradoxes and show what we call a culture map. Here's where the team is. Here's where the team is, at rest. And here's where the team goes under stress. And people are laughing and they're giggling and they're telling stories because it is so true. Because
Wow.
it's just behavior in a data form, and they get to see it. And the beautiful thing about it is they get to depersonalize it, because now they get to see it out there in front of themselves, and we normalize it because we're all dysfunctional. So it's good just to give language for what's dysfunctional about us. And
Right.
hopefully we're on a road to improving ourselves and want to be responsible and blah blah blah. But whatever our core dysfunctions are, they're not going to go away. At least the temptation for those are not going to go away. But if I understand it and take ownership of it and throw myself at balancing myself out and being mature, then I can have it versus it having me. If I don't want to see it, I don't want to take ownership, I don't want to better myself, then it has me. It's running my life. So, a big theme of our work is personal responsibility, probably not surprising. So, and then out of that, we'll put people through a series. And we play a lot of games together, and these are all like negotiating games from Harvard. So they're meant to illuminate these tensions that we show in the Harrison. We illuminate them in real time by doing these exercises together, so people can see it and then comment on it in real time. So they can break up the norm, break up the habit, and watch it, and then hopefully take ownership and learn. And then by the end of these 2 days together, people feel like advocates for each other, like we're shoulder to shoulder, we're comrades. Like none of us are perfect. We've got some business decisions to make, but I can get out of my own way and I can see myself and see how I'm making a great contribution, or see I'm not making a great contribution, and I'm going to self-govern. I'm going to, self-mastery is a big part of our work. I'm going to self-govern, or I'm going to advocate for my teammate from a place of compassion, not from a place of correction.
Wow.
It's there for them. So if I know what you're up to and I know what you're committed to, and you're coming at me sideways, if I'm committed to you, I can take all your heat and I can say, hey man, it seems like you're having a hard day. You'll say, what? I'm just pissed off. No, but you're treating me like I'm the enemy here. Can we not do that? Here, let's talk about what you want to talk about. Okay, I'm here for you, man. Remind you, I'm here for you. And that's very different than, avoiding and then judging you and gossiping about you and making the problem worse, which is what most people do. So that's so we coach a lot of people one-on-one. We do always we do this cultural alignment 2-day offsite, which is way deeper than anybody wants to go, because we go to the heart of the matter. I promise clients that what's running their company is what's under the table, not what's on the table. And so if that's true, and I assert it's true, then that's where I'm going first. Whatever you don't want to talk about is what we're going to talk about. So it's very vulnerable. That's why we have a podcast called Naked Leadership Podcast. It's very vulnerable. And we have those conversations, and surprisingly, even the most stoic, the most shut off, the most indignant person in the room ends up softening and having a real conversation, because all that is just a reaction. They do all that to be defensive, to protect themselves, but there's actually real concerns, real insecurities, real stuff going on underneath that. And most people only go to a therapist to talk about that stuff, instead of actually doing it in real time with people that they care about and need to have a great relationship with. So we revitalize teams all day long, which is what we love doing. And then obviously we coach people and do that on a micro level, one-on-one with key stakeholders and whatever they need moving forward. So we love this work. We do a whole bunch of other stuff too, but that's the core of our work.
And so who is your key ideal customer? When you're, you said you could talk to anybody sitting next to you on a plane. But if you had to say, my ideal customer is X, who is that?
Well, the X factor, so we're not industry specific. So I work with lots of different people from all different verticals, as we've already shown. The X factor for us is we love entrepreneurs, because usually the stakes are really high, and the company moves at the pace of the leadership, which is both bad news if they're doing poorly. It's great news if they're doing well. So I know if I can make a difference with like the founder or the CEO, which is usually the people I coach now, that'll make huge ripple effects. So,
Sure.
So people that are really willing to take a look, willing to be honest, willing to take responsibility and speak that and make that happen, those are key clients for us. I work with men and women, all different age groups, but that willingness to like have some grit and take a risk, those are people that stick with us because we're going to invite them into risk every single conversation to do what you don't want to do, to go prove your insecurities wrong. Like, I don't think I can do that. No. I know you can do that. Up until now, you've been unwilling to. I think though, if you're actually operating out of courage, we talk about courage all day long instead of confidence. But if you operate out of courage, you'll go do this. And if you get really clear about the future, then it's so compelling that people actually want to go do courageous. We all want to be heroes in our own story. So you can leverage that for them to go, make the best decision they've made all year right now. Like once you get off the call with me, go send that email, right? Or even on the call sometimes, like, hey, start the email right now. I'll wait. Then they do it.
That's awesome.
So calling people, so people that are willing to be courageous. I love people that are doing cool shit too. Like we've worked with a lot of aerospace companies. One of the companies now is putting up a rocket in space, the first of its kind. It'll actually go back and forth, change its orbit in space. Nobody can do that right now. The guy that runs that, Tom, he was the first employee at SpaceX. Elon hired him to build the rocket. He's brilliant, obviously, and he's got all these SpaceXers that are, and they're phenomenal. They're interesting people. They're engineers. They're totally nerdy, twice as smart as I am, and I get to learn about space. So cool. I get to learn about textile industry. Anyway, I love working with people that are doing something interesting. I really won't work with people that aren't. So they got to be doing something that I want to like learn about.
Yeah. So, a lot of our listeners are manufacturers, of course, right? The majority of manufacturers in the US are under 100 employees. They're becoming more private equity owned, but the majority are privately owned, mom and pop shops, family owned, passed down from generation to generation. And on top of that, you've got a dynamic of an industry that is historically slow moving when it comes to soft skills, when it comes to leadership development, right? This is an industry where you move up the totem pole when the guy in front of you dies or retires or quits, right? So for these kinds of small organizations, what are some things that they can do to change the leadership dynamic internally to have more effective leadership?
Yeah. Am I talking to the person that's running it or talking to somebody who just works there?
Let's do person who's running it, and then we'll talk about the person who's working there that doesn't have a title but can also be a leader within the organization.
Right on. So I just got off a call right before we started with a guy that's in the middle of a property management company, and he runs it with a family member, and it's not going well. Only because there's all these and runs a family-owned business. You know exactly what I'm talking about. It's complicated. It's leadership with other people is complicated, period, let alone throw family dynamics on it and authority structure, right? So, so if you run it, and let's say you're the son and, dad is still around, let's say, and dad's probably very committed to the traditional way of doing things, probably not as committed to technology as you are. Gives probably leniency to his buddies that have been there for 30 years and doesn't want to rise up all these youngsters that haven't earned their chops. Sound familiar? This is, that's a really great dynamic. So first off, if you are playing not to, there's so many first offs. Let's see where to begin. My invitation to you is first off to get real. And do you want to run this company or not? Or are you there just to please? If so, no big deal, but just get real with yourself. Am I there just because of the pressure, the family pressure, like I should, I must, otherwise it'd kill my mother or blah, 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 and get real with yourself. Because if you're only there to kind of make the best out of something you don't like, it's not going to go very well.
Yeah.
Because you will naturally just tolerate things that you wouldn't tolerate if you were there to play to win.
Yep.
And I would say, you know, I do both and all the time. So winning both is outcomes and your relation, meaning and fulfillment relationships. Like you got to have an eye for both.
Yep.
Right. So with deep respect, you can have conversations with the powers that be that are high stakes, and you could just talk about the future. There's probably not a 65, 70-year-old guy that doesn't want to have a great legacy.
Yeah.
You know, probably.
Absolutely.
You know, and they live with that. Yeah, right. They live with that. Like they actually, even though they're really stuck in their ways, what they probably matter most to them is 20 years from now when they're fully retired, maybe they're still living, that they want to set their kid up for success. As a parent, I want to set my kid up for success. So
yeah.
If you can kind of pull yourself out and jump into a bigger conversation and say, hey, Dad, as we're just kind of making this up fictionally, hey, Dad, listen, I want to be doing this for the next 20 years, and I want to keep, you know, your reputation high, just like you kept your dad's reputation high. The reality is I can't do it the way that you want to be doing it, and it'll kill me, and it'll make me miserable for my wife. I'm speaking as if I'm a guy, for my wife and for my kids, and they're going to be, you know, I'm not going to be a great husband and a great father to these kids. And so can we please like talk about, you know, and we can do it slowly over time, but talk about ways that we can, you know, this company is currently shaped around you because you're great and you led it for 20 years the way. Can we talk about how to slowly start to shift it so the company fits me? Because I can't run your company. I need to slowly start to run the company that looks more like me. Can we at least talk about that? And there's probably nobody that's going to say no to that. They're going to at least be open to talking about it. So you need to be respectful, number one, of, you know, because you're only there, you know, as the co-CEO or whatever, or the COO, because he did it or she did it.
Yep.
So respect that, number one. Second is you're not going to change it in a day. And probably it would break it if you tried to change it in a day. So it's good to start a conversation about it and get a plan together responsibly. What they probably want, first off, you're probably going to pull the company into arenas that they wouldn't know what to do with and don't know what to do with. So there's going to be a sense of a loss of control. Why? Because they're losing control. They're giving up control to you, right? So it's going to have to be a process. And they'll start to feel obsolete, which is probably every baby boomer's worst nightmare, is to feel obsolete. So you have to create a narrative in which they still get to do something meaningful. It's distinct. They're not going to run the show, but they have to find a way to still be meaningful, right? To be the grandpa of the shop, to be the, you know, they could just come to work, bring value, generate value with their wisdom and experience. And don't underestimate that. A lot of people have such an axe to grind that the youngsters do, like because they're just trying to prove themselves instead of, you know, and then they come off irresponsible, and they come off very short-sighted because they're there to try to make a mark instead of there to really absorb and honor all the people that came before them and take that and work with that clay instead of coming out as arrogantly, usually, that no, if I'm going to be here, and they do all these ultimatum type shit and participate in the drama and generate a lot of drama around it, and like maybe even make threats instead of really honoring that and working with them to start a process. Now, if the process starts to generate lucrative results and brings the team together, it can go faster, and it will go faster because it's working.
Okay.
You know,
Makes
so
sense.
you know, if you don't know how to generate a strategic plan to make that happen over time, then you got to go talk to somebody that knows how to do that. Because there's lots of people like you that know how to do that. So they had to talk to you and figure out how to put together a real plan to make this work over time, make more money, you know, keep attrition low, keep people, you know, do this generational gap thing. So that's if you're a person in the company that isn't a part of the family, then you know, that's a little bit harder.
Absolutely.
And you might not want to do it, you know?
You might tell us more about that.
Yeah, you might not want to do it because there is going to be all this drama that you don't have the right to speak into.
Right.
And that just is what it is. So it's like me going out to playing a game of pickup basketball saying, hey guys, can we play football? No, they're here to play basketball. you know? So this family business is going to be run like a family business. So you better get really good at building alliances that are good and healthy and understanding and listening and honoring and respecting and finding out ways. If the old guys are there that have been there a long time, be their best mentee. That's what I would do. Be their best mentee. You know, come up with ways that you can be a value add, even if you're seeing it from like a younger generation's perspective. But if you walk around like with an axe to grind, like people don't get me around here, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Like in this, you're not like you're working at Apple. You know, you're working in a you know, blue collar manufacturing business. It's family run, family owned. It's going to feel like a family. So you better like learn how to be the most valuable person in the family. And you can probably, with certain people, bring innovative ideas, probably with the youngsters that are around, bring innovative ideas, and you guys can work together, shoulder to shoulder. Don't generate an us versus them mentality. Be shoulder to shoulder with people that really honor tradition and get used to wanting to kind of squeeze the tradition for the most amount of value and then add something to it. Don't try to take it apart so then finally you're valuable.
Got it. So you brought up something earlier, Adrian, and after that, I'm going to ask you the last question. But you brought up emotional intelligence, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so talk to us about the role that EQ plays in leadership,
Sure.
especially in relation to shaping, maintaining that healthy company culture that we all desire to have.
Sure. Well, EQ really is also RQ. It's really relational intelligence. So,
all right.
you know, I would say probably first off, I mean, especially speaking as a man, most men aren't trained to know what's going on in their feelings. And, you know, we're not, you know, we're just kind of doers and we're trained to be doers. So first off, if you feel like you're lost, it's okay. You probably are lost. That's all right. It's good to go find people. When I met that guy, Dan Tacchini, I was describing, probably the number one thing that I was compelled with by him is his emotional range. By that, he could be tough, like a guy you do not want to meet in a dark alley, like a tough mofo on one end. Other end, he would weep with people, with them. And I'd never been around that before. Like a guy that could like cry and a guy that could like get emotional. And so I wanted to be around him because I wanted to see, how does he access that?
Sure.
So you're never going to be, I mean, you can maybe put on a show emotionally, but you're probably never going to get beyond what you're able to access for yourself. So if you haven't been through experiences, if you haven't gone, I mean, I'm probably the last person to say go to therapy for a handful of other reasons. Nothing wrong with therapy. But I've got some pretty clear, you know, views on what usually happens in the therapist chair. And I've gone to therapy before. Anyway, sorry, I won't go down that rabbit trail. But the point is, you've got experiences you probably don't have language for. So there might be some coaches you could talk to that'll help you work through, I don't use the word trauma very often, but the difficulties in your life, things you've gone through, you know, things that you've suffered through. Most guys, I'm stereotyping, just tie shit off and like, it's fine. I'm fine. Whatever. It's cool. Never mind, you know, but the purpose to go look in those things is so you actually can become friends with sorrow. If you can become a friend with the suffering in your own life, it makes you be someone that can enter the sorrow or suffering or difficulty or despair or challenge or anger of somebody else. Like if I get in touch with my own anger, your anger doesn't bother me. I can actually empathize with yours. I get it. So when you're, you know, crazy towards me, but I know how I can get crazy, which I can get crazy towards my kids or towards, you know, somebody, you know, a significant other, I can get crazy. And I all of a sudden, like your volatility becomes an invitation. I want to get close to it. But I have to be able to hug the cactus in my own life. Like the thing I want to avoid, I got to go put my arms around it. And we've all been through shit and we've all made horrible decisions at times and we've hurt ourselves and hurt other people. Lots of us just try to forget about that, but that's resource. So if you want to become more emotionally intelligent, you got to become first more emotionally aware, which takes, in this day and age, you got to slow down the pace. It might mean listening. I mean, I read poetry to help me. I do because poetry is romantic. Poetry, I mean, it's both.
Absolutely.
It talks of the most beautiful things in the world, and it talks of the deepest, darkest things in the world. And I want to get close to both of those things and explore it, because I'm not thinking about that. I'm a get shit done guy. I mean, I like I'm talking on this podcast. I was talking so fast for so long. Once again, really sorry. But I can
It's
just
awesome, man. It was a great story.
I can just get shit done, and like, I'm fine, and I can soldier up better than anybody, but I want to be able to slow down and like appreciate the beauty and the depth of what's happening in life. And so therefore I can speak to people from where they want to be versus where they are.
Got it.
Because if someone is really, probably in your industries, people listening, if somebody shows up really closed off and bitter and angry, they're dying for a conversation. But if you're typical, you're going to judge them and keep at a distance. That's what human beings do. Like, they're a threat. I don't like them. I'm going to stay away. But if you can become a person that like sees somebody that's bitter and angry and you can want to befriend them. And if you take that leap, people will respond to that. Like it's like if Susie's just a bitch in the office or whatever, and it's like if you just decide to be her friend, like, hey, you're angry today. What's wrong? And you listen to them. She'll open up to you, and that will become your reputation. Like, oh, Adrian broke through to whatever. What did I call her? Betsy. Anyway, Adrian broke through to Nancy. Nobody talks to Nancy, So if you start to give yourself to the complexity of human emotions, you're going to get closer to it. If you haven't been through anything like that before, if you want, by the way, a big Kickstarter on that, we do trainings called the Revenant Process. It's a 4-day personal leadership training. It's like 10 years of therapy in a weekend. So especially if you're a dude and you would never go to therapy, which I don't blame you, come to the Revenant Process. You'll go to depths you didn't even know you had, but you'll say things you didn't even know you had to say. You'll explore things we're forever going to run from. It is the most, I mean, we just surveyed 2,000 recent grads, and 97% of them said it was one of the top 3 experiences of their life.
Wow.
So come to it. We've got several coming up next year. We are revenant.com. We are Revenant, Revenant, like to come back from. We are revenant.com. There's one in Boise in February. There's one in LA in April. There's a Hawaii we're doing, I think, in June. Anyway, if you go to revenant.com, you can come. And if this all frightens you but compels you, come to one of our trainings. Love to have you.
Yeah, awesome. Adrian, we're running out of time, but we're going to do an entire month on the Manufacturing Culture Podcast in July. We're calling it Mentorship Month, and I would love to have you on. We're going to do panel interviews. We're going to have some guests on that are volunteering for mentorship, trouble finding their way. Would love to have you as one of the panelists for one at least of those sessions. But before we let you go, I do have to ask you, what didn't I ask you on today's episode that you want to share with the audience?
What didn't you ask me? That's a surprising question. Let's see. What didn't you ask me? That I want to share with the audience. Maybe just what do I want to share with the audience? I forget when this is going to land. I don't think I asked you before, but
January.
In January. Well, it's wonderful. That's right. You did mention that. I would just say, I don't know if I can frame it as a question, but just what do I want to say to the audience? So if you're listening to this, it's January. It's January, guys. So 2024 is not yet written. And I'm just wondering if you've wondered about how good this year could be for you. I'm wondering if you've even wondered that, or if you're just doing now in January what you did in December. And if you think if 2024 is just inevitably 2023, you're really normal if you think that way. So no reason to judge it. But I'm telling you that if you ask yourself a few key questions, this year could be the best year you've ever had. Whatever's going left, you could turn it to go right. Now you're probably going to need a lot of help. I know I need a lot of help, and I have a lot of help in my life. So, reach out to our brother here and talk, or you can obviously reach out to us. We're here for you. Just my invite to you. I mean, there's an old Kierkegaard quote, and I'll end with this. that first time I heard it, it floored me. He said that men find a level of despair that's tolerable and call that happiness. And
Wow.
I would invite you to take a look into the areas that you don't want to take a look at. And then whatever you do, if you pray about it, if you reach out and ask for help, whatever you do about it, my invite to you, we don't know how long we have in life, and play to win, will you? Will you take a
Yeah.
fresh look and ask for some help? Men especially always need more help than we want. And
Yeah.
that's like gravity for me. I know that's true. I always need a lot more help than I want.
Yeah.
But if you ask for help, miracles can happen. And I hope that you have a miraculous year.
I love that. That's awesome, Adrian. Thank you very much for joining us today. And that, my friends, marks the end of another thrilling episode of the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. Today's deep dive with Adrian Koehler has truly illuminated the profound impact of leadership in molding and nurturing a positive company culture. It's clear that the right leadership approach can be the catalyst for transformative change, empowering teams, inspiring innovation, and fostering an environment where everyone wins. Remember, the journey to excellent company culture begins with a single step, and that step is enlightened leadership. Be sure to revisit the gems from today's conversation and apply these insights to your own leadership journey. A huge thank you again to Speroni for their unwavering support and sponsorship. Their dedication to excellence and innovation mirrors the values we cherish in shaping a vibrant company culture. Don't forget to visit our treasure trove of wisdom and inspiration at the manufacturingculturepodcast.com. There you can access a wealth of resources to guide you on your path to cultural mastery. And now we turn to you, our incredible listeners. If today's episode sparked or inspired you in any way, share this episode with your friends, your colleagues, and anyone who's passionate about cultivating a dynamic company culture, about leadership, about manufacturing. Your sharing is our growth. This is how we grow. I don't advertise places. I don't we grow through word of mouth. And so if you share this episode with your friends, we're going to grow. Lastly, take a moment to rate and review the show. Your feedback fuels my passion, but it also helps others discover the power of leadership in transforming company culture, because it rockets us up the charts. So stay tuned, stay inspired, and remember, the culture of your company is a story of your leadership. Write a story that resonates, uplifts, and empowers. Until next time, keep leading, keep innovating, and keep inspiring. Have a great day and keep making things.